we're getting so close to the end now. I think that we are in the end game, and I think there is a peace achievable, but it's going to probably take some more concessions from the Ukrainian side and the Russians to get this done.
Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky will meet Donald Trump in Florida today for the latest round of talks aimed at ending the war with Russia. This meeting follows intense Russian bombardment of Kyiv over this weekend, which Zelensky has said is evidence that Russia doesn't want peace. John Foreman is the former UK Defence Attaché to Russia, and he joins me now. Good afternoon, John.
Hello, Jane.
Thanks so much for being here this afternoon, John. Now, the Ukrainian president has said he wants to focus on a US brokered peace plan. But a senior Russian official says the plan is radically different to one that Russia was negotiating with the US. I mean, is this a stalemate? Is it a pointless endeavour, John, if these two proposals are so starkly different?
Well, I think we've come a long way since the 28-point plan, which was cooked up by Steve Witkoff and the Russian envoy Dmitriev. And it's gone backwards and forth. And I think the good thing is actually this has been done off camera. There hasn't been the sort of public negotiation in public, which is called let both sides to walk away. And the Russians seem to be kept involved by the Americans, and the Americans have been talking to the Ukrainians, and the Ukrainians have been talking to the Europeans, and the Americans have been talking to the Europeans. So that's all been going on. But I do think it's coming down to the crunch. Zelensky spoke of a 90% agreement, because that 10% has some massive issues to be overcome. And at the same time, the Russians are saying, well, there's some of our demands aren't in this new document, in particular on NATO, in particular recognition of Crimea and the occupied territories on Donbass and other issues. So it's a big deal, I think, that Trump is meeting Zelensky between Christmas and New Year in Florida. But I think we'll have to see what comes out of it. And I think there are risks for Zelensky that the pressure will be put on him to give ground more to get this over the line by the new year.
Yeah, absolutely. You mentioned Donbass, you mentioned the NATO, joining of NATO. Can we just go through those sticking points right now on both sides, John? I mean, I know that the new plan mentions that Ukraine would have a pathway to NATO, and that has obviously been a red line previously in the 28-point plan. Can you just go through the sticking points that might be flashpoints for this afternoon's meeting?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think the visual 28-point plan was a problem because it had things in there which Ukraine can never agree to. For example, Ukraine will become a member of the European Union. Well, that's up to the European Union. Ukraine will be a member of NATO. Well, that's up to NATO. So if I was running through the key sticking points, I think, are territory in the Donbass and what you do with the other occupied territories. What about security guarantees? They're alluded to in the new document, but will Russia agree to those? Recognition, say, of the Crimea annexed in 2014, and then the other territories' status now occupied by Russia. Will Russia agree to a demilitarized zone in the Donbass? I think it's highly unlikely, because Putin thinks Donbass is his, and he's put so much weight in that as part of his legacy and as part of his sort of rhetoric about being a great war leader. To settle for two-thirds of Donbass, I think, is unlikely. What about foreign troops? The 20-point plan mentions that foreign troops in Ukraine, the Russians are against that. There's also the issue of the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power station, which is extremely complicated and technical, but
it's all to do with it being run by multiple countries, which seems completely unworkable.
Is it going to be between America and Russia, or between Russia, America, Ukraine, or between Ukraine and Russia? It's too complicated, I think, for words. And also root causes. Now, Putin's been talking about root causes, and what he means by that is a sphere of influence, a Russian sphere of influence in Eastern Europe. NATO expansion has to be finished forever. Russia's great power status and its role inside European security to be recognised. And also, I think that American power inside Europe is rolled back. So I think there's some massive issues there. And I think we've got the 20-point plan. You've also got other documents floating around between the Americans and the Russians, between the Europeans and Ukrainians and Americans. So we're not seeing everything. I think we're seeing the situation through a straw. And I think hopefully we'll get some more clarity from today's meeting.
Yeah. John, you mentioned these plans for a demilitarized zone, which I guess Ukraine see as a concession when they're proposing it. But as you say, Russia probably aren't going to agree to it. What are they proposing that it would look like and how it would work? And also, what would that solve?
Well, I mean, I think the 20-point plan, 20-point plan has shown that Ukraine is budging slightly from an absolutist position that we can give away none of our territory to, well, we could come to some sort of fudge over the Donbass. And I think the Ukrainian proposal is, well, the Ukrainians will pull back militarily, the Russians will pull back militarily, and there'll be some sort of civilian policing in that area. But of course, the Russians would say, well, hold on, that's Ukrainian police in what we think is ours. And Ukrainians would say, well, the Russians still in what we think is ours too. So I don't think it's going to go far enough. I think the Russian red line, the massive red line, is on the Donbass. I think everything else is negotiable. And I think we'll have to see whether, as I said, Trump brings the pressure back onto Zelensky to give ground further to get this over the line, because what he wants is a win by the anniversary of his inauguration in January, and he wants to have the big photo opportunity to himself, Putin and Zelensky shaking hands.
Absolutely, yes. I mean, this war that he was going to solve in 24 hours, John. Do you think that the US is proving effective in its role as an intermediary in this war?
Yeah, I mean, Trump changed the position for America from being sort of strongly on the Ukrainian side to being between the two sides and saying, look, ultimately, Trump's position is this doesn't really matter to us. We want this. I want this over and done with. I want to focus on the big issues. And I would say the diplomatic process in the last year has been haphazard. There's been some steps forward. We've got a 20-point plan, 28-point plan, whatever you call it. We've got shuttle diplomacy negotiations going on private. But we've had setbacks such as the Alaska summit, the blow up between Zelensky and Trump in the White House, the abortive summit, which was going to happen in Budapest, and then America being on sanctions. So it's been a bit sort of two forward, one back. I don't think it was helped by the people that Trump has chosen to be his interlocutors in the process. But I think over the last month or so, I think there's been a new degree of seriousness. I think the role of the British, the French and the Germans has been important. I'm glad the European Union's still on side. NATO's hung together quite well. But again, it doesn't matter if you're 99% or 99.9%. If that last bit is not done, there's no deal, and everybody can walk away. And I think there's also a risk for Zelensky that Trump will sort of just back away and say, look, I've had to try my best, nothing to work. Give it all to the Europeans and you carry on.
Yeah, I mean that's a risk, isn't it? Zelensky's kind of got a lot of different lines to tread here. I mean, all eyes will be on him to see if he can avoid another blow up between him and Trump. But obviously, he doesn't want that blow up for multiple reasons, not least, as you say, because if Trump walks away, where does that leave the peace process at all? If you were giving some tips to Zelensky on how to handle this afternoon, what would you tell him?
Well, I'd give him the same advice I gave after the blow up in February: is do not rise to the bait in that room. Don't play things out in public with Trump. Do it behind closed doors, and keep your eye on the big picture. If you want a just and lasting peace, which I think is the word everybody's using, for future Ukraine, the future sovereignty, Ukrainians' democracy and viability is all on the table here. And I think at some stage, Mr. Zelensky is going to have to consider the totality of the package, everything from security guarantees, reconstruction, reparations, European Union membership, NATO, etc., and see what he may have to give ground on. I think we're getting so close to the end now. I think we are in the end game, and I think there is a peace achievable, but it's going to probably take some more concessions from the Ukrainian side and the Russians to get this done.
Brilliant. Thank you so much for your time this afternoon, John. It's great to have your insights. That's John Foreman, who is a former UK Defence Attaché to Russia. And we will, of course, be bringing you all the news as we get it from that meeting between Donald Trump and Volodymyr Zelensky in Florida today.